Hi, welcome to another Photography Simplified video. My name is Chris, and in these videos, I do my best to simplify digital photography for you with the goal of helping you to get out and take great photos. Today, we're going over my beginner tips. Let's get into it. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my tips that I wish I would have known as a beginner in 3 different areas. First, how to capture great photos. Second, how to sharpen your creative eye as a photographer. And third, how to better process and edit your images. If this content ends up being helpful to you, please remember to leave a like and subscribe so you can see my other beginner tutorials as well. All right, let's first go over my tips for capturing better photos. First, plan ahead. If you can come up with a game plan before, scout the location out, do your research on where you could shoot from, nearby areas that might also be good, when is sunset, what is the weather going to be like. Coming up with a game plan ahead is going to make it so much easier to capture a great shot when you're there. Another thing I would suggest is to take your time. So many times when I was a beginner, I would be at these incredible and amazing locations and just rushing to take all kinds of images, when if I would have just taken a little bit more time, slowed down, maybe even set up my tripod, got my settings right, and taken just one good shot, it would have turned out incredibly better than the thousands that I rushed to take. So take your time, get it right. Make sure your settings are good, double check everything in your frame, that your composition is how you want it, things like that. Another tip to help you get good photos is to try different angles. All of these photos I took on the same day within minutes of each other at the exact same waterfall. But you can see all the different angles and the different ways that I can compose this waterfall. So remember to try different angles and approaches. Another tip to help you capture better photos is to work on exposing your images correctly. If you can expose the scene correctly in camera, it'll be that much easier to get a great ending image. However, if you don't expose it correctly, it'll take a lot of work and adjustments in editing to try and fix the exposure, and really there's only so much you can do. So know how to read your histogram. Maybe turn on the highlight alerts if your camera has that, so you can know what areas are overexposed and getting clipped. Also, along the same lines, be sure to zoom in on your images. Check things like the exposure or the focus if something is blurry. Zoom in on the images after you take them and inspect them to see if there's anything you need to adjust or change. Another tip that was really helpful to me as a beginner is to pay attention to the edges of your photo. You want to make sure that your subject isn't getting super close to any of the edges of the frame, or maybe even getting cut out of the frame. And likewise, that nothing is coming from outside the frame and crossing over into the frame slightly, distracting the viewer from what your subject really should be. You'll also want to know how the settings on your camera work. Take the time to get to know your camera. What settings change what? As you learn the camera and better understand it, it'll be so much easier to just focus on capturing whatever scene or subject you want to when you're out shooting. However, if you're not familiar with those settings, you may find yourself getting lost and distracted, fiddling, trying to change things, and lose out on an opportunity to take a great shot. Another thing is to know when to use your tripod and when not to use it. Typically, if it's bright enough and you're shooting at a fast shutter speed, you can shoot handheld. However, if it's a little darker or you're using longer shutter speeds, you may want to use a tripod to avoid capturing any camera shake. Next, let's cover some tips to help you sharpen your creative eye. First, take your camera with you places. Having your camera ready or close by will enable you to take the amazing shots when they happen. Not having your camera and having amazing conditions or an awesome subject can be heart-wrenching. So have your camera with you, and along the same lines, practice frequently. Take images frequently. Don't wait till you have an amazing trip planned that you've been waiting months for to pull the camera out of your camera bag. Use it frequently. Not every shot is going to be a 5-star or a perfect image, but using it regularly will help you to continue to refine and sharpen your creative eye. Another thing that can help you sharpen your creative eye is to just experiment and try new things. Try capturing subjects you don't normally capture, or try a new method or technique you haven't done before. With each of these things, you'll learn a little bit, and you can apply that in all aspects of your photography, making you that much better of a photographer. Another thing that you can do to sharpen your creative eye is to look at lots of images for inspiration. Look through the work of your favorite photographers. Look at their galleries and the images that they have, their websites. Find other photographers that are similar or have different styles and look at their images. I know personally, as I've looked at a lot of work of incredible photographers, it's given me so many ideas and inspiration for my own photography and the images that I want to capture. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, there may be more helpful content in my book, Photography Simplified. If you would like a visual beginner's guide to photography, check out my book, Photography Simplified, available in both paperback and ebook format on Amazon. The book covers topics including exposure and the exposure triangle, sharpness and focus, gear, composition, editing, and more. It even includes a list of beginner tips. There are helpful graphics to explain each of the topics that are covered in the book. I've put a lot of work into this book to include everything I wish I could have known when I started out. If you think the book could be helpful to you and haven't already, check the link in the description for more information. Finally, let's discuss some tips on how to process and edit your images. First, I recommend that you shoot in RAW rather than JPEG. I have a whole video on why and why RAW might be more preferable, but for the most part, what you should know is as a beginner, RAW is going to give you greater flexibility and leeway when editing your photos than a JPEG file would. This is especially helpful for a beginner still learning to master the camera settings, exposure, and so on. Another thing is if you ever plan on printing your photos, which I would highly recommend because it's very satisfying for the photographer to see their printed work, you'll want to make sure that you don't edit your photos with your screen brightness all the way up. Our screens are much brighter and backlit than any paper or printed product will ever be. So if you plan on printing, bring that screen brightness down to about half or less depending on your device, and then edit your photo. If not, you may find when you print it, it comes out really dark. Another thing is to give your edits the time they deserve. Don't rush to finish edits or to get through a whole batch of photos because you want to post them quickly. You may not do the best work and then end up not loving the edit later. On the other hand, don't take too much time on a photo. Sometimes you might spend meticulous amounts of time just combing through the sliders and changing this, that, and the other. And it may end up that you over edit the image because you spent so much time looking at it. If you are struggling or want to make more tweaks, sometimes giving yourself a little bit of time away from the photo to come back and then edit again can really help. Another thing that I would recommend all beginners do is come up with a way to organize and back up your photos. Having this or any method figured out is going to really help you down the line as you capture more and more images. And finally, learn how to export your images correctly for what you intend to use them for. Whether you're going to print the image or for online, there's going to be better settings depending on which you want to do, and learn what that is so you know how to export your images correctly. Finally, just have fun. Learning photography is going to take time, and I would say it's a never-ending pursuit. You're never going to be a perfect photographer, but just enjoy the experience of being out and taking images. Hopefully this video and these tips helped you. See you in the next one.